A week out from the U.S. midterm elections, President Trump makes a final push on immigration and the economy, hoping to lead his party to victory. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. But first, a week of violence shocked the United States just days before the 2018 midterm elections. An anti-Semitic attack on a synagogue in the state of Pennsylvania killed 11 people, while 15 pipe bombs were sent to prominent critics of the U.S. president. That and a racially charged shooting at a grocery store in Kentucky have the country on edge. But U.S. President Donald Trump is focused on winning and his strategies to highlight immigration. On Tuesday, he created a buzz about his plan to end birthright citizenship in the United States, a policy that's actually protected in the country's constitution. Here now to discuss all of these issues ahead of the midterm elections is Nathan King. He is CGTN's White House Correspondent. Sonia Dridi is a journalist with France 24 and Europe 1. She covers the White House and U.S. politics. From Atlanta, Jennifer McCoy is a political science professor at Georgia State University, where she focuses on polarization and democracy. And Eric Bolling is a conservative commentator and host on digital network CRTV. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Nathan, let's start with you. You have been traveling in the country, the Midwest, getting an idea, a sense of what the mood's like out there. What have you found?
Well, America's divided, but you didn't need to travel across the Midwest to work that one out. But very interestingly, you know, when you get out of the Washington Beltway, people care less about the divisive rhetoric that we hear here every day. But there are real hot-button issues, and this immigration push by the U.S. president, especially in the last couple of weeks, is worrying a lot of immigrant communities. And, you know, we didn't go to Texas in the South. We went to the North. And in Wisconsin, a lot of towns have been re-energized by immigrants, but they're still feeling a little bit unsure. Let's take a look.
Abbotsford, Wisconsin, a quiet, unassuming town of just over 2,300. Judging from the state of Main Street, it's seen better days. But one small corner of this block is thriving. La Botana feels more like Mexico City than central Wisconsin. Yvonne Vasquez opened this bar with her husband to cater for the growing Hispanic community that now make up a quarter of the population. It's also a place that brings the whole community together, white and brown.
Because here in Abbotsford, we have, you know, like Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, but we also have a lot of Caucasians. We have a lot of white people, so that's my community. I live in here. I went to high school here. I went to college, not here in Abbotsford, but here in Wisconsin, so this is my community. My community is everyone.
While immigration has brought much-needed economic activity to this town, the increasing anti-immigration rhetoric has also cast a shadow. Today at La Tropicana supermarket, it's thriving. A few weeks ago, however, it was deserted. Rumours of an immigration raid kept people at home. In this climate, rumours travel faster than facts.
Hey, my baby, come on.
Calming fears and getting the facts out to the Hispanic community is the job of Yvonne's father, Alejandro. After greeting his daughter and granddaughter, it's time to go on the air.
Hola, ¿qué tal, mi raza? ¿Cómo se encuentran?
Alejandro was a journalist back in Mexico. Here in Wisconsin, he has a radio station, and since 2004, Noticias, a Spanish-language newspaper. No fake news here. In fact, it's a reassuring voice in the community, especially on immigration.
When ICE is coming, they come for people who have orders of deportation or arrest. It's people who have a criminal records, and real criminal records. And if you are a bad boy, man, don't care where you're from.
During the recent scare over deportations, Noticias ran a factual account on its front page, in English too. It detailed the limited and legal raids that had just happened. But there is fear in this community, and Alejandro knows it. Family photos published in the paper don't have names next to them. To be honest then, the reason that people's names are not in here is because you don't want to worry anyone about immigration status.
Yes.
That's basically why you do it.
Yes. And because the people don't want to see the names.
He says the community is counting on him.
It's a big, big responsibility. I want to see a nice community. I want to see a strong community. And I want to do whatever I need to do for push a great community.
Great report there, Nathan, but
Thanks.
the focus was on immigration. What are the other issues that are dominating this election?
Well, I think if it was left up to President Trump, that would be the sole issue. He thinks he won in 2016 on it. He thinks it carried states like Wisconsin, potentially Pennsylvania and Michigan, as well as economic dislocation. But healthcare is still big. The fallout from Obamacare not working well, the Republicans not being able to replace it, is still worrying a lot of people, especially who don't get it through their employer. The economy, too. I mean, the economy's doing great in the US. We've had over 4% growth, then 3.5% growth. You know, this is really good. We've got nearly full employment. But the good jobs are still not there, and there's this feeling that some parts of the country are doing really well and others aren't as well. So what we're seeing is a disconnect. The Democrats are campaigning like on local issues, on healthcare. The Republicans very much on immigration. And you know what's not being played out? The big tax cut. They're not talking about that at all because it hasn't really filtered down, or at least people feel it hasn't.
All right, I want to go around the table and get your views on this election a week out. Let's go to Atlanta to Jennifer McCoy. Jennifer, President Trump has been doing the rounds. He's been attending a number of campaign rallies, rallying up the base. There have been accusations that the language that the president has been using has been somewhat divisive, very polarizing. What do you make of the campaign so far?
Well, he's using the same strategy that he used in 2016. He knows that divisive and polarizing language is good for elections in general, particularly if what you're concerned about is riling up and energizing your base to come out to vote. And that's what he feels that the Republicans need this time. But it is very divisive. And he, as president, has used more vilifying and demonizing type of language than almost any other president that I can think of in the last century. So that's causing a lot of fear, so that both sides then begin to distrust and fear the other side, because he's dividing the society into us versus them type of camps. And that's negative for democracy in general.
Eric, what is your view on the election right now? Is this principally about immigration, or are there any other major issues that's going to determine what happens?
Well, I think we've seen a couple of pendulum shifts over the last actually a few weeks. In fact, I think the Democrats were very strong. They were talking about a blue wave going into the election, maybe taking the House back with 24 wins, and also even maybe the Senate. Then this immigration issue did bubble up. And Nathan's right about one thing, and I'm going to call you out a little bit on another thing, Nathan. He's right that immigration is a win for Donald Trump because his base is fired up about immigration. He absolutely did probably lock down a 2016 win because he was strong on the border wall, build the border wall, make Mexico pay for it, et cetera, et cetera. Your piece was well done, but you kept saying immigration is an issue. Immigration is not an issue for Donald Trump, nor is conservatives. Illegal immigration is an issue for Donald Trump and conservatives.
And you saw in that piece, we actually differentiated between, and so does the community.
Listen, though. My point is, for Donald Trump, it's not immigration that's a problem. For me, let me take it one step further. For me, immigration, we should be increasing immigration, but legal immigration, we should be cracking down on the illegal immigration. I probably speak for many, many millions of people who are going to go to the polls in a week from today. And so I think immigration will be their deciding factor. But I'll just give you one more second. That pendulum did start to move away from the right and Donald Trump with the recent spate of violence, with the pipe bombs, and then followed up on Saturday with the synagogue.
I want Sonia to get in, but I just have to say, you know, he's called Mexicans rapists. He wants Norwegians, more Norwegians in.
He didn't say Mexicans are rapists.
I think he did. He came down that escalator and launched his campaign.
Murderers and rapists that could be
Look, I don't want to get into a big argument, but he doesn't differentiate between nations when it comes to legal or illegal. He's called African countries, a name I can't mention on the air. So, you know, the list goes on, Eric.
But that is what he was elected on, Nathan. He represents.
But it's not. He doesn't
speaks
distinct
for
between
many,
legal
many
and
millions
illegal.
of people
It's the other
in America and outside of the coast, East Coast, West Coast.
All right.
Middle America is buying what he's selling.
All right. Let me bring Sonia in. Sonia, you know, a whole load of things, as Eric has pointed out, have happened in the past 2 weeks. One of the things that we've seen over the past few weeks, actually, is this caravan, as it's been referred to, people coming over Central America, getting into Mexico, trying to seek asylum here in the United States. It's a story that's big in the United States. It's a story that's big internationally. How is that being reported, and how is it being seen by the world?
Yeah, of course, Europe and particularly France, where I come from, is looking at this issue. You know, is very interesting in knowing, you know, what's going on and why is this such a big deal. And of course, a lot of media in Europe also report and got it that it's you know, a way for Donald Trump to boost his partisans and his supporters just before the immigration. So I think that's pretty clear on the European side. I just come back from Texas, where I was there last week and where Donald Trump held the rally. It's also interesting to see that among the Republicans, I met some Hispanic who also support Donald Trump's policy, and I think we don't talk much about that. But right. I was at the rally. I saw some Latino. I saw some African Americans, like Nathan said. The economic is very important for the electorate. So I even met, you know, some Hispanic who told me they agree with Trump about the caravan. And what's funny, it's also like they repeat exactly the same rhetoric. Some of them told me there was like people from Middle East in this caravan. Some of them told me they had the papers. They got the citizenship maybe 10 or 20 years ago, and now they don't want people from the gang coming from South America. Yeah. So I think while you travel around the country and you get out of Washington, you see that Donald Trump has a lot of supporters, and most of them are not disappointed. It's also interesting to see that the Democrats, and especially the young people, are really trying to mobilize, you know, more voters. And for instance, in Texas, you had a lot of new voters, a lot of people who registered for these elections. And for a lot of young people, I think the climate change is something I heard a lot also to talk about. So it was. It's
Nathan, just over this past weekend, we had these tragic shootings in Pittsburgh. People died, people were injured, policemen were injured as well. It comes days after there was these pipe bomb scares all over the country. There were the shootings, at least the racist attacks in Kentucky as well. How are these things impacting the election?
I think they're front and center, and you've seen over the last few days that the US president doesn't want them to be front and center. He wants to get back to immigration. I was in Pittsburgh on Saturday. I was really angry because it was a beautiful community, Squirrel Hill, and they were old people essentially worshiping. They should have felt safe, close to their God, and they were gunned down in the most horrific way. And while you cannot, and we will not, draw a straight line between those horrendous actions and rhetoric from the White House or elsewhere, it doesn't help the environment. And this and the pipe bombs, well, they were assassination attempts. Let's be clear about that. The two perpetrators seem to have one thing in common, that they were riled up on social media. And that is something that this country really has to look at. And we don't want to point the finger at just Donald Trump. You go on Twitter, and it's full of hate. And there are other websites that are far worse.
We had 16 months ago, we had a man come to a baseball field and shoot up a baseball field trying to murder 20 Republican congresspeople and almost killed Steve Scalise, the majority whip, who was a Bernie Sanders supporter. Now, I agree with you. We can't draw these lines between politicians that are provocative and who are aggressive, maybe even overly aggressive, and people who do stupid things. I mean, we would be in such a dangerous place if we started tying people's rhetoric to crazy people's actions.
I completely agree with can I just say, but I completely agree with Eric, except one thing. Bernie Sanders never told anyone to punch his opposite supporters in the face. He never also made a distinction between globalists and patriots, and we all know what that means in coded language.
That certainly doesn't, that certainly doesn't
but I'm just saying,
incite violence in any world I've ever been involved with.
The history shows that actually inciting people to violence does actually work.
Okay, I need to get to Jennifer. Jennifer, we're hearing it again, you know, the rhetoric that's been used. You know, we've also been seeing these reports that the country, the United States, is divided right now. There's some who are saying that it's never been divided as much as it has been now. Do you think that's true, or is that just an exaggeration?
Well, we've certainly been divided before. Obviously, so divided we had a civil war in the 19th century, and there have been moments in the 20th century as well. And one thinks of the 1960s as a very divided time and several political assassinations. But as I said a moment ago, this feels different. And two things I think in particular make it different. One is social media and the 24-hour news cycle. But as was mentioned, the social media and the fact that we simply don't have any common source of news and information that we all can agree on anymore. And we're hearing very different stories. And the other, I will say that I think rhetoric is extremely important. And inflammatory rhetoric that intentionally plays on people's fears and anxieties and exploits them creates a climate where some people will choose to go too far. And so I don't think that we can, I agree we can't draw a straight line, but we have got to realize the responsibility of political leaders in particular and others in economic and social leadership positions. Anyone with a bully pulpit and a microphone needs to realize their responsibility and the impact that their language can have on individuals and fear and anxiety and anger. And if that's purposefully inflamed, then that is dangerous for all.
Eric, does the president need to tamp down his language, tamp down his rhetoric? Does he need to be more of a unifier? Because there are many, you'll see that in the media every day, who are saying that it's his angry messaging in those rallies, at those rallies, that's poisoning the political atmosphere right now. Of course, the president, for his part, blames the media for it.
I'm very friendly with the president. I speak to him quite often. I speak to his senior advisors almost daily, if not several times a day. I have recommended that as we've pointed out across the whole table here, that maybe asking for violence or a punch or I'll shoot you down Fifth Avenue, it'll be okay. Maybe that rhetoric needs to go away. On the other hand, it needs to go away on both sides. Maxine Waters last week, recommended that her followers follow Trump supporters into restaurants, into movie theaters, and disrupt them. So it's happening on both sides. I think Trump should absolutely tamp down any sort of reference to any sort of violence whatsoever. However, and I have done this, I've recommended that he does not ease off on the media. He's not treated fairly in the United States media, in global media. I'm kind of defending, I'm kind of like 4 on 1 here.
Well, the media, you're right about the media, except I think you're pointing the finger at the mass media. Have you watched Fox News over the last few days?
I used to be, I was 12 years on Fox News.
I know, and you were very successful there. But you're not upset about your network,
Nathan,
talking about smallpox coming into the country with these migrants? I mean, some of the rhetoric.
One network. I can name 40 networks that aren't
the
Fox News that have
coming out of Fox News, which, as you know, the president watches a lot, and that's why you're friends.
I do not defend heightened, provocative, violent rhetoric.
Sorry, I had to say that, but it's...
No, and I think I don't think we can justify him attacking the media, even if CNN, you know, a lot of Americans will agree that it's maybe not, it's sometimes also a bit partisanship like Fox News. But I think in any case, the president should not encourage, foster his supporters to attack CNN, because I was at the rally and all of a sudden he pointed out to the media tribune and then he pointed out to CNN, and for a few minutes everyone in the room looked at the media and screamed and chanted, CNN sucks. And I don't think that's something normal, and I don't think that the president should accept that. And I will add something else. I covered the Middle East for a few years, and we had this anger, you know, at the journalists for a while, and it could be very dangerous sometimes. And seeing this happening, the hatred toward journalists here in the US, I find it very worrying and dangerous. And I don't think either Fox News, either CNN, I don't think the president should encourage or tolerate all this insult and violence toward journalists.
I agree. Being a Chinese journalist has been, you know, I've noticed a shift in the last couple of months because of the rhetoric.
Well, there's a recent Saudi journalist that was killed by the Saudi government. There's a recent several Russian journalists who were killed likely by the Kremlin as well.
But getting back to sort of what about it? I mean, is that like excusing?
No, because I don't. My point is, I don't recall. I don't know of any journalists who've been killed because of rhetoric that
we don't want to get it to that stage, surely. I mean,
absolutely not.
Well, you're saying it's harmless rhetoric.
No, well, okay. If rhetoric, if we're going to tie a a string to violence that happens based on a politician's rhetoric, both sides are going to be in deep trouble, deep heat.
Okay. Thanks. Jennifer, let me go to you on this debate about what the president has been saying about the media. I mean, we just heard Eric tell us now that there are Democrat politicians who've been making, statements that have been could be construed as incitement as well. We heard from Maxine Waters. Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, recently said, "Kick him." Point is, they're not the president, are they?
Well, that's one point. They're not the president. The president has a responsibility to the entire country. But the other point is also the degree. And I would add, in addition to the inflammatory nature of it, is simply the lack of factual nature. And to demonize, demonization's been used in psychological warfare throughout time to enable people to kill other people in warfare. I mean, soldiers are taught that. So when you are calling poor people walking on foot 1,000 miles, carrying children in their arms, and invading army, that sounds very alarmist. And I've heard people responding, "Oh, they're coming to conquer our country." So that is just, completely a lie and very inflammatory.
May I just address something? Yeah. And people on the left have said you need to show the map of where this caravan is to have context. It doesn't matter where they are. It's who they are and what they plan to do when they get here. We had somewhere around 7,500 at one point people coming to the U.S. border looking to enter illegally or call asylum.
That's legal.
But 80% of asylum seekers are not here legally, and they're not granted asylum. My point is this: if we don't know, if we let 7,500 get asylum here, what's the next wave going to be? 15,000, 30,000? And by the way, if it's not Central America, there's probably 5 billion people in the world who are at a lower economic and far dangerous environment in their home countries than they are here. So do they deserve asylum as well?
This Caravans happened before. It happens every year, right? Shepard Smith on Fox News yesterday basically said none of these people will be coming in hardly. A handful maybe, like in previous times. This is pure scaremongering, and we know why. We understand it's politics. You have to whip up your base. But
years ago, it was 20 people coming, or a year ago, it was 1,000 people. Now it's 7,500. What's next year? 20,000?
All right, I want to get Jennifer. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to go back to the point. The whole immigration debate is something that has to be resolved. The problem is making it a political agenda like this, throwing out a far-flung idea today to end birthright citizenship, and attaching to that again an unfactual statement that the U.S. is the only country in the world when there are 30 countries in the world who give birthright citizenship. But it's clearly a political agenda. We need a serious debate on immigration. And in fact, the proposals coming from the president have been not only to restrict refugees, people seeking asylum, but to restrict legal immigration. And so we know his position on that. That is across the board. But we need a serious debate and not this kind of inflammatory and demonizing type of rhetoric, which also, if you're calling your own political opponents, citizens of the country now, standing by for the chance that, of course, we've heard continuing up until this week of lock her up, and the press, enemies of the people, I mean, those are all inflammatory and demonizing type of rhetoric that we should not be hearing from the President of the United States.
Nathan, I want to get to something. This is an issue which is domestic, but it has an international dimension to it, and that is the trade war between the United States and China. Now, you've been in the Midwest. How much interest is there on the part of, say, farmers and farm workers and what is going on?
Yeah, I mean, farmers, auto workers. We're in Wisconsin, for example, with farmers, and they're having to basically think about what they're going to plant next year, January, basically. And there's not going to be a lot of soybeans going in the ground. There's a huge glut because Chinese basically stopped buying them. Politically, though, what the president has done is basically said, look, this is happening, China's responding, China's going after you, not the fact that I started this. And there is a constituency that's willing to give him a little time to see if he can get a better trade deal with China. And that includes the United Auto Workers in Detroit. Very democratic. But a lot of them I spoke to were like, hang on a minute. our wages going up, investment's going to go up, we're going to bring more jobs back. This is not necessarily the case because, of course, the price of cars is going to go up, and if price of cars go up, people buy less cars. But they too are willing to give the US president a narrow window, 6 months to a year, something like that, to try and deliver trade deals. Now, I study this every day. I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll see. But politically, he's got that going for him in key states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and elsewhere. But the state of farming in this country, especially dairy farming, Mexico's cut all exports of cheese, for example, is in a real mess. Wisconsin's going to lose 600 dairy farms this year, apparently.
Sonia, I want to talk about foreign policy, and we know that people don't vote on foreign policy here or in most other countries. But if we look at the foreign policy of the Trump administration, where he's pulled out of many deals, things like the Paris Accord, the Iran nuclear deal, pulled out of TPP, the trade war with China. What is the view from European countries about American foreign policy? Is there a feeling that, let's say, one scenario, the Democrats take over one of the houses or both houses, that this will put the brakes on Trump's foreign policy?
I mean, I think that now Europeans are careful. For instance, in France, we know that we talk a lot about a blue wave, and that now maybe it will be more tight than what a lot of people expected. And but definitely, I think for instance, for the Paris agreement, people would love for the Democrats to come back for the nuclear deal. I mean, the French government worked very hard on it. As some other European governments. So that's something very important. So I don't think anyone is jumping on conclusions, and is everyone is trying to be a bit careful because they saw what happened the last few years. But yeah, for the Paris Agreement, for the Iran deal, and we'll see, because Donald Trump is going a few days after the midterms in France, so there will be some discussions, but I think now even the French president would try really to negotiate it with Trump at the beginning. They still have a good relationship, but I don't think he expects much from Donald Trump now, either on the Iran deal or on the climate.
Eric, I've only got 20 seconds. You have to make this really quick. If one or both houses flips, is that effectively the end of Trump's legislative agenda?
It may put a logjam in D.C., which won't hurt Trump in 2020. It may actually help him in 2020. Let me just very quickly. Trump he's a deal maker. He loves making these deals. He promised breaking trade agreements. He's doing that. He came back with a better European trade agreement, Mexican trade agreement, Canadian trade agreement. He's working on a Chinese.
Okay.
You may not like it, but he is putting America first. And that's what he was elected on.
We are going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's all we have time for. You can see more on the US midterms on air and online. Check our website. That's america.cgtn.com/midterms to see all of the stories from Nathan's road trip and the rest of our coverage of the upcoming election. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.